Thanks for joining us on our special coverage of the G20 Summit South Africa 2025. This year's G20 Summit is taking place in South Africa for the first time, officially kicking off with the arrival of the guests, which will begin in just a few moments. It has been going on. And President Lee is also in Johannesburg to join the meeting. While we wait for that to happen here in the studio in Seoul, I am joined by Professor Min Jung-un. Welcome, Professor Min.
My pleasure.
And also our top office correspondent, Song Yujin, is joining us in the studio. Welcome, Yujin.
Great to be here, Tommy.
We are waiting for G20 leaders to enter for their entrance ceremony. We have just watched the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer walking in to be welcomed in Johannesburg. So, Eugene, this is the first time G20 summit is taking place in South African soil itself. Let's start with the 2025 edition of the G20. It is taking place in Johannesburg. Is there any other significance to this year's event?
Right. So I want to begin with the three core themes of this year's G20 summit. The three keywords are solidarity, equality, and sustainability. And these are issues that really speak directly to issues that matter deeply to many developing nations. So throughout the two-day leader summit, which South Korean President Lee Jae-myung will take part in, the leaders will discuss inclusive growth, sustainable development, global financing, climate change, and also major structural challenges shaping the world economy. And I want to mention that President Lee Jae-myung is making his debut at the G20 summit, this time in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Indeed. Now, Professor Min, I do have to mention equality, sustainability, and solidarity are the three main themes at the G20 summit this year. Walk us through how important are they at this year's edition?
Well, the themes of the solidarity, equality, and sustainability, they include the global changes that the G20, the countries, member states have got nowadays. As you know, we have got uncertain the global trading, the environment nowadays, and the United States and other major power countries are aggressively pursuing their own national interests in the global market systems. So it's not easy to secure the free and open trade and the multilateral trade nowadays. So G20 summit meetings, which is one of the most important multilateral trading cooperations and the member states, among the member states.
Right.
So they needed to.
Right.
They need to enhance and promote the multilateral trade nowadays.
Right. We are now seeing Russian Deputy Chief of Staff of the Presidential Executive Office. He is Maxim Oreshkin. He is attending the G20 summit on behalf of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Professor Min, is that a surprise that President Putin is not attending?
No, because of course, the President Putin wanted to attend the G20 summit this time because the South Africa is one of the important the partners for Russia. But unfortunately, in terms of the illegal attacks to Ukraine, international court systems and got the President Putin as the international criminal.
Right.
So if the Putin tries to attend this G20 summit, he may be arrested.
Exactly.
Because the South Africa is observing the outcomes of the international court decisions.
Right.
So in terms, of course, it's unlikely that President Putin will be arrested in the South African territory, but who knows?
He doesn't want to take the risk.
Yeah, so because yes, so that's why the President Putin didn't attend the G20 summit this time, and instead he is the deputy just attending the summit this time.
Right, and not a surprise that Russian President Vladimir Putin is in Johannesburg. Instead, the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Presidential Executive Office of Russia is attending on behalf of Russian President. Now, Eugene, this is President Lee Jae-myung's first attendance at the G20 summit. Like you said, it is his debut. What's the most crucial diplomatic objective that the presidential office is prioritizing for this year's summit?
Well, I think that the presidential office is hoping that through this trip, President Lee attending the G20 summit this year, really widening South Korea's diplomatic scope. Because previously, after the president took office, he visited Canada for the G7 summit. He visited the United States 2 times for the first ROK U.S. summit and then the UN General Assembly in New York. He then went to Malaysia for the ASEAN summit. Then back here at home, he hosted the APEC leaders meeting. So this marks his very first time visiting the African continent. And by meeting with the leaders of the G20 member countries, the presidential office says that the scope of President Lee's diplomatic approach could reach to Africa and the broader global South region by engaging with leaders that he hasn't met in person or hasn't spoken over the phone. This could really help South Korea increase its presence on the global stage once again.
Right. Professor Min, like our Eugene mentioned, this is President Lee Jae-myung's debut at the G20 summit. What goals do you think he has other than realizing his pragmatic diplomacy?
Well, the President Lee is attending first the G20 summit this time, and it's a golden opportunity to show his sales diplomacy with the G20 member states. As you know, South Korea needed to expand the scope of diplomacy beyond the Korean Peninsula, and to do that, the economic and technological cooperation would be the key the domains of the enhancing the cooperation with the member states. So, based on the South Korea's strengths, like the high-tech industries and strategic industries and those things, South Korea can enhance cooperation, economic cooperation with the member states. And as you know, South Korea has got world-class manufacturing capabilities, including semiconductors, large volume batteries, and the biotech, and AI, and shipbuilding, and nuclear power. So the many and most G20 member states want to make and enhance economic cooperations with South Korea.
Definitely.
So, and in this summit, South Korea will also show its leadership in terms of the AI industries, which is one of the major policy goals that the Lee Jae-myung government has got. And many countries want to secure the cooperation with South Korea in the fields of the artificial intelligence. So it would be the very important and the good opportunities for South Korea to improve their economic and technological cooperations with the G20, the member states, and where they consist of the most important to the economic growths in the world.
Definitely. Well, it seems like the administration regards the G20 summit as an, like Professor Min said, a golden opportunity for President Lee's so-called pragmatic diplomacy. Eugene, I do have to turn to you for this question. Remind us the core ideas of this pragmatic diplomacy.
Right. So pragmatic diplomacy, President Lee Jae-myung defines it as foreign policy centered on national interest rather than ideology. So it's sort of like a realist and practical approach that aims to secure South Korea's prosperity on the international stage by strengthening its alliance with the United States, but at the same time, managing relations really well with China, Japan, and Russia, and others through a balance rooted in national benefits. Now, another big part of pragmatic diplomacy is expanding Korea's economic footprint globally and using multilateral platforms such as the G20 summit this time to really elevate South Korea's global standing. So if we talk about this, about the pragmatic diplomacy outreach in terms of the G20's perspective, success would really mean widening Korea's diplomatic space this time and forging new partnerships with countries that President Lee hasn't really engaged with since taking office.
Well, President Lee has been highlighting this pragmatic diplomacy, not just in here in Johannesburg, but in UAE, US, and also Malaysia, and also here in South Korea's Gyeongju. Professor Min, then in terms of pursuing this pragmatic diplomacy, will the approach be any different in South Africa?
Well, I think that we can expect pretty much continuity in terms of the implementing pragmatic diplomacy in the here and the Johannesburg. But the main difference between here and there is that it is expanding the scope of pragmatic diplomacy beyond the Korean Peninsula. So the focus of the diplomacy could be different in here and Johannesburg there, because outside the Korean Peninsula and probably the Northeast Asia, security domains would not be not as much important over the Korean Peninsula. So probably the economic domains and the economic cooperations could be more important far away in the Johannesburg and the African continent. So think about the importance of making the connections with the African countries in terms of securing the supply chains, stable supply chains in terms of natural resources and rare earth minerals, as well as the securing the future, the valuable labor forces from those the bright younger brains in African countries. So I think that we are expanding the domains of economic cooperations and technological fields for the future of South Korea in the African continent.
Right. We are now seeing live footages of the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, being greeted. Now, he is greeting global leaders, not just G20 leaders, but leaders around the world who are in Johannesburg to attend the G20 summit. Now, Eugene, I'd like to turn to you. Like solidarity, equality, and sustainability are the main themes at the G20. Is there any specific area that South Korea and President Lee Jae-myung can play at this year's edition?
Right, so this year's three core themes, solidarity, equality, and sustainability, the member countries will address these three core themes throughout the three sessions of the two-day G20 Leader Summit. So in session one, South Korea could take a leading role in shaping discussions on restoring the multilateral trading system. This is very important at a time of rising trade tensions between the world's two largest economies, the United States and China, and also rising protectionism in the global society. And in session two, Korea could contribute to talks on climate change and energy transition. We know that the Lee administration has been very vocal about going green. The government, for example, recently approved a new 2035 emissions target that it announced at the COP30 climate change conference a few days ago, and is pushing really hard on building a renewable energy infrastructure at home as well. Finally, in session three, one of the key topics is artificial intelligence, an area where the Lee administration has ambitious goals. Seoul wants to become a global top 3 AI powerhouse, and it's working with major global companies such as NVIDIA, OpenAI, and BlackRock to expand data center infrastructure at home and also secure more AI investment.
Well, Professor Min, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung is in Johannesburg to attend the G20 summit. Now, you mentioned we can expect to look forward to lots of economic cooperation with African nations. Is there any specific country, African nation, that you believe will see great cooperation with South Korea, or is it? You can talk about South Africa as well.
Overall, making cooperations with the African countries is important for South Korea because the African countries have got the pretty good potentials in terms of the economic growth and acquiring the high-tech technologies or something like that. But among the countries, I think that one of the most important partners in the African continent could be the South Africa itself. As you know, the South Africa is one of the highly advanced countries in the African continent, and it is hosting the G20 summit, first time in the African countries. It shows that the South Africa is one of the successful countries in the continent. So I think that South Africa could be the important entrance or the gatekeeping country for South Korea's economic cooperation and technological coordination with the African countries. So South Africa could be the base camp. for the South Korea's the cooperation with the African countries. So South Korea, based on its national strengths, like the high-tech industries and strategic industries and know-hows and other things. So South Africa want to enhance its cooperation with South Korea in the fields of AI and like a biotech and the defense industries and others. So if South Korea can make the successful cooperation with South Africa, it would give to other African countries the good signs and the messages to that the South Korea is the very important and effective, useful partner for African countries. So that would be the pretty important foundation for South Korea to have with the African countries in the future. And the most importantly, think about how important it is to secure the supply chains in terms of the natural resources. We can remember what happened when the U.S. got the trade negotiations with China. Unlike the first Trump government, China has got lots of preparation for the upcoming the trade negotiations with the second Trump government. But it is known that China has got the various cards to prepare for the Trump's government's with the Trump's government's trade negotiations.
Exactly.
But the China just used the two cards, like the export control about the rare earth minerals and the suspending the imports of the U.S. agricultural products like the big beans. Then Trump gave up, to give in and just made the negotiations with China. So we can see how important it is for the securing the rare earth minerals and natural resources. So the many important the major power countries, including South Korea, nowadays are trying to secure stable supply chains in terms of natural resources. So that's why we are focusing on the importance of African countries in the field.
And like you mentioned, the South Korea-South Africa partnership could be a good starting point for to broaden South Korea's collaboration with other African nations. Now, Eugene, then how could such collaboration contribute to South Korea's maybe diplomatic or economic interests?
Right, so starting with diplomatic interest for South Korea, this could really serve as a chance for the country to deepen ties with the African continent and the broader global South region, which will once again expand President Lee's scope of pragmatic diplomacy. We know that South Korea hosted the South Korea-Africa Summit last year, and if we have a successful outcome from President Lee's South Africa trip this time, maybe we could see a South Korea-South Africa summit or a summit with other African countries in the near future in President Lee's term. So this will not only help establish Korea just as a participant of this year's G20 summit, but as a country taking on greater global responsibility. And I want to mention that this will be very important as the presidential office last week announced that South Korea will host the 2028 G20 summit here in South Korea. So this could become a really good stepping point for the country to successfully prepare for this big multilateral international event. And at the same time, this could also be a chance for Seoul to rebuild and reinforce its international credibility after last December's political turmoil and diplomatic vacuum, followed by former President Yoon Suk-yeol's surprise martial law declaration. Now, moving on to the economic front, Africa offers tremendous potential from natural resources to fast-growing consumer markets and a relatively young population, considering how the international society is grappling with an aging and shrinking population. So there are many, many sectors where future cooperation is possible between South Korea and the continent. For example, public health, high-tech, rare minerals, infrastructure, energy, and education.
Definitely. Now, the G20 leaders are also expected to discuss global economic risks. Professor Min, you mentioned lots of opportunities that can be discussed at the summit this year, but what about inflation? What about supply chain instability? What kind of solutions or contributions could South Korea propose here?
Well, one of the themes of the G20 summit is the sustainability and solidarity and
equality.
So for the coping with the emerging problems like inflation and other economic problems, we need to enhance solidarity among the G7, G20, the member states. It is like the worldwide symptoms that we currently have. So it requires the member states to make connections and coordinate each other to solve the problems. Of course, it's not easy because it's like the widespreading the problems in terms of the COVID-19 and other things. But it also requires for the member states to share their insights about how to deal with the ongoing problems. So the advanced member states needed to share what they have with the other member states like developing countries. So they needed to make more donations and make more the financial contributions to their member states. And in return, the other member states want to make cooperations and show their commitment in terms of how to follow the advanced countries' lead to get out of the global problems. So the G20 summit meetings this time would be the good opportunity for the member states to talk about how to they enhance solidarity each other, and it also they needed to talk about how to enhance equality, which means that all the member states share the fruits of the economic growth and the technological advances.
Right.
So they needed to talk about how fairly they would enjoy the outcomes of the economic growth and the technological progress at the summit. We will see what kind of the outcomes the member state would have.
Right, so we are watching live footages of the G20 South Africa 2025 taking place in Johannesburg. We are seeing not only G20 leaders, but also leaders from around the world to walk in on the red carpet to attend the entrance ceremony. Now, Eugene, among many other agenda items, we have to talk about AI and digital innovation being one of the core themes at the G20 summit. What kind of cooperation or norm-setting role can South Korea play in this area?
Well, AI and digital innovation are definitely areas where South Korea can lead global discussions. I want to take you back to the APEC leaders meeting, which ended early this month in South Korea's city of Gyeongju, because there the 21 member economies announced the forum's first ever written agreement on AI cooperation. The document's name was APEC Artificial Intelligence Initiative. So this document, when you look at it closely, it outlines closer coordination among governments, industry, and academia, and calls for major investment in AI infrastructure to make AI more accessible. So besides the APEC leaders meeting, President Lee has consistently emphasized the idea of AI for all, which is to really increase accessibility to AI at a time when many people around the world are using AI in their daily lives. So through this, South Korea is really planning to ensure AI technologies benefit the entire global community.
Right, so we are now watching UN Secretary of State walking in to join the G20 leaders entrance ceremony. Now, Professor Min, how could the Lee Jae-myung administration design a concrete strategy at the G20 to help Korean firms expand abroad or to attract more foreign investment?
Well, nowadays the presidents and the leaders of countries are conducting the sales, the diplomacy, where they lead the discussions among their diplomatic counterparts about how to enhance their economic and technological cooperations. So the President Lee's roles is to lead the economic discussions, and then the economic leaders of South Korea can follow the President Lee's lead and make the cooperation and enhance their discussions about how they enhance, improve their economic cooperations with each other. For example, in these the G20 summit meetings, and many the business leaders of South Korea went to with the President Lee this time, and in the private sector meetings, the business leaders will meet their business counterparts there. So they will have the many different business leaders from the G20 member states, and they will talk about how they could enhance their cooperations, and then they will produce the MOUs and the economic contract. So eventually we will see the very beautiful numbers in terms of the economic, the contract, the understanding and the promises. Then that would be the basis or the foundation that the business leaders and the Korean business would enhance the economic and the technological cooperations with the G20 member state business leaders, and would be good for South Korea.
And we are seeing President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, now being greeted by the President of South Africa, Eugene. Isn't President Eugene heading to Turkey after the Johannesburg trip?
You're definitely right, Tommy. So after he wraps up its attendance at this year's G20 summit, President Lee Jae-myung, for his last stop of his 10-day four-nation tour, will make a state visit to Turkey. I want to mention that Turkey is one of the top 4 military contributors to the Korean War. The two countries have a special strategic partnership, a strategic partnership. So there, Presidents Lee and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan will discuss areas of bilateral cooperation, such as defense and high technology.
Right. Now we see Chinese Prime Minister Li Qiang walking in. As we all know, Chinese President Xi Jinping is not in Johannesburg to attend the G20 summit. Professor Min, forgive me if my question sounds unrelated, but do you think any tensions between China and Japan at the moment will play any tensions here at the summit, or will they be able to manage it separately?
Well, I don't think that the China and Japan will continue to have their bilateral conflicts at the G20 the summit. It's like the multilateral the meetings. So I don't think that they will meet together bilaterally and continue to fight or elevate the conflicts at the multilateral meetings. Instead, they will try to be a little bit fade away from each other and maintain distance and try to be silent about their little bit the conflicting relationships. But it is true that nowadays the world community are focusing on how the two countries are elevating the bilateral conflict each other. So it would not be a good news for the regional economy and the stability in East Asia. So I hope that they would resolve those conflicts peacefully as soon as possible.
Right. Well, you're saying that tensions will linger even in Johannesburg, right? Although the leaders are not. Well, Sanae Takaichi, Japanese Prime Minister, she will soon appear on the screen, but Chinese President Xi Jinping will not be here. Instead, Prime Minister Li Qiang has just entered to attend the entrance ceremony. Now it looks like we are now seeing the Canadian Prime Minister, right? French President Emmanuel Macron has just arrived to be greeted by the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. It's been It actually hasn't been a while since the last time we saw him because he did attend the APEC 2025 in Gyeongju.
Right.
Now, Eugene, for our viewers who are just joining us here on Arirang TV, covering the special live coverage of the G20 Summit 2025 South Africa, it is the first time taking place in the South African continent, right?
You're definitely right, Tommy. That's one of the major points that make this year's G20 Summit very significant. Again, it's the first G20 Summit to take place in the African continent. And I want to relate that with the three core themes of this year's summit, which is solidarity, equality, and sustainability, which are issues that matter deeply to especially developing nations who are also part of the G20 forum. So throughout the two-day leaders meeting spanning 3 sessions, the participating countries, the leaders, who we are seeing right on the screen, they will discuss inclusive growth, sustainable development, global financing, trade, climate change, and so many more shared global challenges during their discussions.
Definitely. Well, it is President Lee Jae-myung's third stop in Johannesburg after having stopped by the UAE and Egypt. Now, Eugene, you have been following the President Lee's the trip to the Middle East and now Africa. Walk us through the major deals that he is bringing home during his visit to the UAE.
Right, so his first stop was the UAE, where Presidents Yi and Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan adopted a joint declaration strengthening their special strategic partnership. The two countries agreed to expand cooperation in AI, nuclear energy, and defense. And specifically, South Korea announced that it will participate in the UAE's $20 billion Stargate project to build hyperscale AI data centers. In the defense sector, the two governments agreed on joint development, research, and production, and even exporting to third countries, potentially opening the door to over $15 billion worth of projects for Korean firms. And then the president's next stop was an official visit to Egypt, where Seoul and Cairo reaffirmed their commitment to peace on the Korean Peninsula and also in the Middle East. They also agreed to push the Korea-Egypt Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, expand defense cooperation, including F-A-50 aircraft and anti-tank missiles, and signed memorandums of understandings on enhancing cultural and educational exchanges.
Right, as our Eugene was speaking, the President of European Commission and the European Council, Ursula von der Leyen, and also has just entered, and also now we are seeing Antonio Costa. He's the President of the European Council of European Union, and being greeted by the South African President. We are seeing more G20 leaders entering to attend the entrance ceremony. Now, Professor Min, I'd like to turn to you. Eugene just gave us a recap of President Lee's UAE state visit. Now, UAE and South Korea, they have a special strategic partnership. Was there any moment that stood out to you during his state visit there?
Well, the UAE is one of the important partners for South Korea in the Middle East. And as you know, the UAE has got lots of interests in the enhancing cooperation with South Korea in terms of defense industry and the bio industry and the AI industry. And among them, I think that UAE has got more interests in enhanced cooperation with South Korea in defense industry. You know, the United States has provided the security to the Middle East countries traditionally, but the
Professor Min, sorry to cut you off. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has now just entered. Sorry to surprise you.
No.
Sorry. Now, President Lee Jae-myung has finally entered. I feel like it's the first time me seeing him in a gray suit. Right?
It's not often that he wears a gray suit,
right?
I suppose.
Okay. Glad I'm not wrong here. Now, this is President Lee Jae-myung's first time attending the G20 summit. It is his debut, although he has been traveling around the world to really pursue and realize his pragmatic diplomacy. And I'm pretty sure this is the first time that President Lee Jae-myung is meeting the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, right?
Oh, well, he actually actually did meet President Cyril Ramaphosa. It was back in June, like almost 2 weeks after his inauguration when he visited the G7 summit in Canada.
I see, right.
I remember he was one of the very first world leaders that President Yi met face-to-face. And as far as I remember, their first face-to-face bilateral meeting was, it was very candid, and the two had a very friendly conversation. So I guess that will hopefully lead to a very good mood in today's G20 summit.
I'm sure that one was a brief one, but now that President Ramaphosa is hosting the event, I'm sure they will have deeper conversations on how to tighten their cooperation in various fields, like our Professor Min mentioned. There, we just watched the South Korean President Lee Jae-myung entering entering to attend the G20 South Africa 2025 officially. Eugene, now G20 isn't the last stop of his 10-day four-nation trip, and this is the first time that he's gone on such a long trip to other countries, right?
You're right, Tommy. So his trip this time, he goes to 4 nations. So he's already at his 3rd stop, and it spans over 10 days. So this is by far the longest overseas trip that the president has embarked on. So it's not over because it's once again his 3rd stop. His last stop will be Turkey. We saw Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan enter the G20 summit venue as well.
Right.
So President Yi will make a state visit to Turkey, which begins on Monday and it will end on Tuesday. Turkey is the 4th largest military contributor to the Korean War. And this year it marks exactly 75 years of the start of the Korean War. So during his summit with President Erdogan, President Lee Jae-myung is expected to discuss deeper cooperation in defense, nuclear energy, and biotechnology.
Definitely. Well, Professor Min, now, like our Eugene mentioned, this is the 10-day four-nation trip to President Lee Jae-myung. Now, I'd like to point out how South Korea will be hosting this exact same summit in 2028. South Korea will be the host country of the G20 summit. This will be a great opportunity for South Korea to acquire and get ready for the upcoming event, right?
Yes, of course. Just often the president leads the entrance to the G20 summit in Johannesburg and South Africa. Our president's presence itself could make the huge symbolic moves to the African countries. African countries want to enhance the economic and technological cooperations with South Korea. So the president Lee is visiting South Africa and attending G20 summit and having bilateral meeting with the South African president would be the great signal or the message to the African countries, and South Korea thinks that South Africa would be the base camp for the South Korea's economic cooperation with African countries. So this diplomatic move will definitely be the foundation to enhance cooperation between South Korea and African countries, and it would be the seed for most of the African country leaders to visit South Korea for attending the G20 summit in 2028.
Well, Eugene, I'm pretty sure you can tell us this, although it is a big event to host something like G20 summit, but South Korea should be ready to host something like this, such a huge event, right, after hosting the APEC summit, right?
Right, definitely. So I think that hosting the APEC leaders meeting this year would have been a very big experience and big learning point for South Korea. And this was not the first time South Korea hosted the APEC leaders meeting. Back in 2005,
Exactly.
South Korea first hosted the APEC leaders meeting in Busan, and this time in Gyeongju. So I think that these two experiences would have really accumulated. And I also want to mention that this will not only be the first time South Korea will be hosting the G20 Leaders Summit,
Right.
because I remember back in 2010, Korea hosted the G20 Summit in Seoul as well. So it has past experience before. It has experience hosting these multilateral events,
Definitely.
APEC Leaders Meeting, the G20 meeting, and also the ASEAN Summit before. So I think that we can definitely learn from this experience, and that could hopefully lead to a successful hosting of the 2028 G20 Summit in South Korea.
Well, now staying in Johannesburg, Professor Min, how difficult is it to issue a joint statement or a joint declaration among G20 leaders, or have you always seen one every year?
Yes, and in the past, it would be easy, relatively easy, to expect the joint statement coming out at the end of the G20 summit. But this year, we got a little bit different situations, unfortunately. Think about what happened when the world got the G7 summit earlier this year, and unexpectedly, it was not easy to have the joint statements because the United States, in terms of the Trump government's the re-entrance to the White House, they are aggressively pursuing their own national interests, and they are against the free trade and open trade, multilateral trade nowadays. So it was not easy to produce the outcome of the G7 summit as well as the APEC summit. But in terms of the sincere and hard efforts of the chair country, South Korea, it was successfully we could successfully have the outcome of the APEC summit in less than months. But it was not easy, though. So I don't think that this time the South Africa could successfully garner the member states the agreements in terms of producing the joint statements, because as the media pointed out, and the United States is opposing producing the outcome of the G20 summit this time, joint statement. So it's unclear whether the South Africa would successfully have the outcome of the G20 summit this time. But we will see what will happen. But it would not be easy at all.
It was relatively easier in the past. Now that we have more hurdles, global hurdles, and new leaderships around the world, it's not always easy to issue something like that among the G20 leaders. Now, Eugene, I'd like to turn to you for our South Korean front. Now, this is President Lee Jae-myung's first attendance, as we have been mentioning. What is the most important diplomatic objective then the President to Office is prioritizing? What can you tell us as a President to Office correspondent?
Well, I think as this marks President Lee's first trip to Africa, the main objective of President Lee and also the presidential office will be expanding the diplomatic scope of President Lee Jae-myung. I want to remind you that it's been less than 6 months he took office, so it's really important at this time to build rapport with other fellow global world leaders and to visit as many countries as possible and forge partnerships, strengthening existing partnerships as well. So this time, the G20 member countries, they consist of a lot of countries, including Africa and the Global South. So President Lee, by meeting with other leaders of the G20 member countries, he's expected to really widen his diplomatic outreach, which will be very helpful for him in the next 4 years and a half.
Definitely. Now, Professor Min, I'm sure President Lee has a lot of ideas, plans to show off at this year's G20 summit. What do you think will top his speech or his remarks at the upcoming summit?
Well, as you mentioned earlier today, the themes of this G20 summit include the solidarity, equality, and sustainability. And for the equality, the G20 member states have lots of interest in sharing the fruits of AI industry. So the President Lee will introduce the plans that the South Korea has in promoting AI industries across the globe, and especially among the G20 member states. So the President Lee will introduce what visions South Korea has in terms of the AI industries and how South Korea will distribute the fruits of the AI industries and how the South Korea will show its leadership in AI field. So the President Lee will introduce the AI initiative that South Korea has, and that will, I expect that initiative will be well received by the G20 member states, and it will be it provides the good momentum for South Korea to be the world leader in terms of AI industry. And we know that unfortunately the United States, China, and the Russian leaders they don't attend the G20 summit this time. So it's a good opportunity, golden opportunity for the AI, the power countries to introduce and promote and show off the initiatives to the member states. And South Korea will enjoy that kind of the alternative things.
Definitely. All right, Professor Min, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Always a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks so much.
And also a big thanks to our Presidential Office correspondent, Song Yu-jin. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And that wraps up our special coverage of the G20 South Africa 2025. Thanks for watching.